This is the final game, and as promised, we do have Aretti's opening. Knight f6, pawn g3, king's Indian attack. Pawn d5 is the Yugoslav variation, bishop g2, bishop f5. White castles, pawn e6, pawn d3. And here there are a couple of book moves, but Cardoso doesn't choose any of them. He plays bishop d6. The bot is recommending knight c6. That's been played a handful of times. It's not really very common. The book move is h6, queen's knight to d2, bishop e7, and these moves can be reversed. You can play bishop e7 first, queen e1, castles, e4, bishop h7, queen e2, c5. And you could reach this same exact position if you start with bishop e7 here. It's the same thing, it's just different. Queen e1, h6, same exact thing. Bishop h7, queen e2, c5. Move order not so critical there. The bot preferring knight c6. Knight c6 has only been played like 3 or 4 or 5 times, not very often. Bishop d6 by Cardoso, and Bobby sticks to his guns and plays his queen's knight to d2. Well, the bot calling for c4, I mean, maybe you could bring your other knight to d4. Well, it started as a question mark, but then upgraded to an inaccuracy. Either way, not liked. Here's the funny thing. When I play this, it says no, knight d2's the move. But when Bobby played that, it says no, c4's the move. Fickle bot. h6 here. I would suppose knight c6 is another. Please don't give me inaccurate. Yes, finally a star. h6, though, not really necessary. I mean, if there was some reason that white would ever play here, you could play h6 then. But the bishop can't even come here. The knight's in the way, so it's a waste of a time. e4, sticking to the book line for the most part. Bishop g4, h3. And here, that gets a star. I'd like to, since the king is in the center here, hasn't castled yet, I'd like to go ahead and take here. I get a check mark. He'd have to take with the knight, wouldn't he? And then I could, hey, the bot says open the e-file. Wow. That shows you how little the bot knows about chess, to be honest. You don't open a file when your king hasn't. How do you open the e-file when you haven't castled? Anyway, here I'll hit that bishop and make him give himself up for my knight. And I'll take it with my knight so that I open the door for my other bishop. Arrgh! The bot really giving me a hard time today. Anyway, h3, bishop takes the knight. Knight takes the bishop. Thank you, Bobby, for backing me up. And the threat here is e5, forking the bishop and the knight. Well, queen's knight to d7 puts 2 pairs of eyes on that square, preventing pawn from advancing. Queen e2 here, renewing the threat of e5. So d takes e4. D takes e4, renewing the threat of e5. Bishop c5. The bot pointing out one good way to prevent white from playing e5 is to play e5 yourself. Cardoso, bishop c5. And you guessed it, ladles and jelly spoons. e5. White rolling out his attack. Knight d5, pawn c4 hits the knight again. Knight e7, bishop d2. Yeah, rook d1 makes good sense, doesn't it? Lining up with the queen. Bishop d2, though, was Bobby Fischer's choice. Knight f5. Now, king h2. This is necessary because you can see that this pawn is pinned, and so knight f5 is attacking the g-man. So king h2 breaks the pin. Pawn c6, blunting the diagonal. Pawn b4, hitting the bishop. Bishop retreats to e7. Now bishop c3. Pawn G5. Castling surely is better. Knight D2. I actually had B5 in my sights, but the way I've been getting scored, I'm even less sure tonight than I was when I was thinking about this. Let's see what Knight D2 gets. It gets a star. Let's see what B5 gets. Ah, just not my knight from Ficklebot. All right, Bobby getting the star. Queen C7 from Rodolfo, and now Knight E4. Of course, he is eyeballing the D6 square at the right moment. This square also weak, by the way. Rook G8. Curious looking move. Castles is the best move here. We castle. If white plays F4, we play C5. If pawn takes the pawn here, pawn takes the pawn over here. You do not want to play knight takes the pawn here. Well, it gets a check mark, but I didn't think it was the best move. On knight takes E5, white plays knight C5. I guess you could play bishop F6 here, though. But, right, I'm going to get my rook in line with your king. Either rook. Back, 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 back. Well, knight E4, rook G8, curious looking move. C5, king F8. Very confusing by Rodolfo Tan Cardoso. Well, knight D6, he'd been longing to play this. Strong, strong square for white. B6. Of course, bishop takes D6 is answered by E takes D6 and or C takes D6. You usually like to capture toward the center. This is one of those rare exceptions because capturing with the E-man opens this diagonal and also begins to open this file. Well, it likes capturing with the C-man. It's a stick to the principle. Okay. Anyway, B6 from Cardoso. Knight takes knight, pawn takes knight, pawn E6. Bishop F6. Knight F6 will see the rook come to the E1 square here as well. Either rook, the bot wanting the king's rook. I like keeping this rook in line with my opponent's king for the time being. Anyway, bishop F6. Bobby with rook A D1. Now you're probably wondering, why doesn't he just take the knight? Well, it's not fast enough, right? He takes F7 would probably even be better than E takes knight because at least E takes F7 hits the rook. But Bobby just gets out of that line of fire and says, take my bishop, I'll take your knight with a hit on your queen. Cardoso, not keen on that, played knight E5, but rook D6 interferes with the queen's defense, making this super attack against the knight fairly lethal. Wait a moment, did I make an error? He played rook E1 first. I thought rook D6 comes in here, but I guess I was wrong. Bobby played rook FE1. All right, knight G4 from Cardoso is check. Pawn takes. Bishop takes the bishop. Now rook D7 does hit the queen. Queen C8. Rook takes the pawn with check right here. King E8. It's all over but the crying. Now rook D1. Well, the bot calling for pawn takes pawn. I believe that I've got a winning move in queen D3. Finally, ladles and jelly spoons, my first double exclam of the night. So he's got to deal with this monster threat. That's my point. He can't just go grabbing rooks like this. My point is, I'm going to give him checkmate here. And he has no way of defending it, because if he plays queen D8, he has to leave this pawn undefended. And that's going to be checkmate. So the rook can't be taken. What can he play? If he plays rook G7, I'm playing queen D6 anyway. And if he takes the rook, it's all over. And take your pick of checkmates. Oh, there's a bishop there. Take your pick of the only checkmate that's there. Ooh. If he prevents queen d6, by throwing away his bishop, well, that's just stalling a move, isn't it? I'll just grab you. Well, the bot says it is. The bot called for, oh, right here. The bot called for g takes f5 when I suggested queen d3 and got a double exclam. Let's see if that gives itself a double exclam. It gave itself a star. It gave itself a paltry star. Fischer with rook d1. It doesn't really matter. There's no wrong way to win a chess game, is there? But I chose this because it's a very direct winning move. If you play queen here, bada bing, bada boom. So there's nothing. Bobby with rook d1. I guarantee you Fischer was not calculating for an immediate mate. If you would have told him there's a mate on the board, he would have found it. He's just improving his pieces. He knows he's winning one way or the other. Cardoso did try rook g7 here. Well, rook takes the rook, bishop takes the rook, pawn now takes the pawn on f5, and right, now queen h5. So he went king f8, pawn e7, and black resigned here. He's only got 3 legal moves, and none of them are good. If king here would just go ahead and fork, and we're not going to take this here, we're going to go here. Because his only legal move, okay, he could give away the queen. I was going to say his only legal move is king f7, but then this is checkmate. But he can throw away his queen. But as you can see, that's still going to be, you know, it's going to be checkmate either way, right?